Counter-Strike fans, welcome to my name is Ponder, my roster shuffle rundown for January 2022, coming into the new season of Counter-Strike. Lots of stuff's changed, and as much as stuff's changed, everything's going to be the exact same as it was in 2021. I'm going to have this mix of the online and on-LAN era, and it's going to be a test, a grind, as it usually is in the calendar year for a team to rise above, prove themselves, and just keep improving week after week, month after month. There's been an off season over the Christmas break and whatever. Tournaments are finally starting to ramp back up into the swing of things. The first one's going to be the Blast and the end of January, and I am preparing this presentation to help everyone get ready for what's to come. So broken down by region, I'm going to be covering what I see to be the four main regions of Counter-Strike. But let's be honest, there are really only two. CIS in Europe, and then a tier below them is Brazil and North America. What happened in the 2021 year is online Counter-Strike to force everyone to get on the same server, essentially, or as close to the same server as possible, where ping differences equated to losses. Teams in North America really struggled to come across to Europe, and then a lot of Brazilian teams didn't even try. And as a result, the gap between these two tiers of regions was separated larger. So CIS and Europe are a step above where North America and Brazil were in 2021. 2022 are going to try and change that a little bit. Hopefully, some more teams are going to get in Europe and boot camp and become more European, essentially, because that's where the best Counter-Strike is. There was one team that was the best team, obviously. One team will be the best, and everyone else is not the best, and that was Navi in 2021. We're going to talk about all the teams later on, but before we get into all the teams and the breakdowns of the regions, I just want to talk about what is competitive Counter-Strike. There's a lot of words on this slide. Don't worry about reading them all. Competitive Counter-Strike is a 5 versus 5 team-based attacking and defending video game that is a first-person shooter. So, in your perspective, you have a gun in your hand, utility in your toolbar, maybe some armor on, and all you have to go off of is the information your teammates are feeding you and the stuff you can see on the screen. So, it's really, really important that teams are on the same page, working together, right? Teamwork is really, really important. And the objective of the game is to plant or defend, like target or defend a site, A or B, on either map. There are like a bunch of maps, 7 I think in the rotation, and yeah, those are usually really consistent. The roles and positions are variable from team to team, but generally follow a basic structure. So we have 5 members on a team, and usually one player from each of those 5 will take one of these archetypes of a role. It doesn't have to be literally you're exactly this in every specific instance, but you are taking on the identity of this kind of player for our team. So there's an in-game leader, right? It's better for 5 people to do one incorrect call or one okay call than 5 people to by themselves come to the right idea and try and do it independently in a team game, because the teamwork, it just makes the dream work. The in-game leader sets the tone for the tactics and the mid-rounding of most teams. So before the round even starts, how you're going to go into that round, how you're going to approach it, and what you're going to do in the map itself to get the win. I talked about getting wins and rounds. Let me talk over that too, just in case anybody doesn't know. So you play rounds where you're trying to attack or defend these sites, and if you succeed, you get a point. If you don't, you lose a point, or the other team gets a point. The first team to get 16 points wins. And the way you determine if you're attacking or defending depends on each game, but you do switch. There's a guaranteed switch in every single game, so you get an opportunity to attack and defend in every single game. But the first team to 16 points wins. So you might only get one turn on defense, one round. If they score all 15 on attack, and then on defense, they only need one more to win. So after the in-game leader, there's the secondary color. This is just more information to the one person who sees one perspective on their one screen. Everyone else has to be a secondary color to an extent and feed information to the leader, but then there has to be someone who's directing that information, making sure it's the most important pieces. The AWP is a sniper. It's just a sniper rifle in the game and is very, very important. The best players in the world are, and the stars, the biggest stars, are usually the oppers, the snipers. They usually create the most highlight reels and can do the most damage. A team that has a really good opper, like the best oppers in the world, will almost always beat teams that don't have very good oppers. It's that type of position where you do have to go scoped up 1v1 versus the other person sometimes, and when there is a clear distinction between one and the other, it can break open the whole map because it's almost like a 5v4. This person is usually highly set up though. The opper, being the star player, they usually have a lot of help along the way to be the star. One of these people who helps them is the entry fragger, the person who goes in first and almost has to sacrifice their body for information sometimes, or just to break into a door that is closed, that is going to be opened, and people are looking at that door. You need someone to go in first, and usually, even though they know they don't have a good chance to win the fight, they have to go in with an open mind and be really, really talented to sometimes get those kills that they shouldn't. Support players, are similar to entry fraggers in that they're helping the whole team, but in a different way. The entry fragger is usually the front of the shield that's bashing through the wall. The support player is usually maybe not in the back specifically, but they're doing something to help facilitate another player's potential. So throwing utility or checking, an angle for someone or protecting the flank. These types of things support players do that keep teams together. Another role is a lurker. There are more than just these roles, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to give you 6 roles that players take different identities for, right? So a player can be an entry fragger and a support player, but they're probably not usually going to be a lurker because they're an entry fragger. Lurkers are, again, type of the people who are on the flank that the support player is defending against, trying to play the opposite side of the map and gain more information. Usually a good secondary caller is a lurker because they're on the opposite side of the map from the in-game leader. They're on the opposite side of the map from the whole group of people. And they're just, again, getting more information, seeing what they can attack and cannot attack. Okay, so that's kind of a basic overview of Counter-Strike. And now let's get into the competitive side of things, where we have some very, very, very competitive regions and competitive teams. So one of those regions is the CIS region, which basically you can envision as like the USSR post USSR. Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Latvia, that area of the world, and those types of languages. So there are 3 Tier 1 teams, Navi, Gambit, and Virtus Pro. I'm going to be talking about all 3 of those in depth. And all 3 of these teams are actually without roster changes. So hopefully this should be a bit of a faster breeze through. There are other teams in this region that are dangerous and that can take games off other teams or might have superstars on them. We'll talk about those guys later. So let's talk about the very best team of 2021, Navi. Not as sincere, were expected to be the best team of this year. They have the best player in the world with Simple and have been slowly and steadily building their level over the past, I want to say 12 months to 18 months. They have recently subbed out a rookie, put in a rookie, subbed out one of their veterans called Flamey. And this person, the rookie, has been a star talent, an emerging breakout star in the scene. Really, really insane statistics. Headshot percentages off the charts. And if he continues on his development potential, he could be one of the best riflers, entry fraggers in the world. This team was not always seen as the best team in 2021. They had a bit of a shaky period during online, maybe a little bit of motivation. They had a little bit of a roster swap, but by the end of the year, they were by far and away the best team in the world. Some of the intangibles around this roster is a contract year for both Electronic and Simple. What that means is that I'm gonna get myself gone. What that means is that they are playing for their lives. They are playing for a paycheck coming into next year. This happens in traditional sports all the time, where when it's a contract year, you can usually expect superstars to push themselves above and beyond. This little point I don't see very many people talking about, but I think gives extra motivation for this roster to continue their form into 2022. Bit was definitely the rookie of the year last year, definitely. So let's talk about some downsides now for why Navi being the best is actually bad for them. Everyone's trying to beat them. So that means that they're going to be counter-stratted. That means that they're going to be highly scrutinized. They're going to have a high level of criticism that other teams are not going to have, just by nature of being the best team in the world. So if we look at other teams in their region, like Gambit or Virtus Pro, Navi will be held to a higher standard and expected to beat those teams almost every time they face them. One of the reasons why they're so good is because of their tactics. Their in-game leader is Boomich, and their coach is Blade. And this Blade is an absolute legendary veteran of the Counter-Strike scene. I could do a video on him by himself. But let's talk about the adaptations to their tactics. Before, with Flamey in the roster, and when Boomich was a bit of an inexperienced in-game leader, he still is relatively, but much more inexperienced, this roster was doing a lot more they were a lot more committed to their tactics. So they were bleeding out clocks a lot. They were doing some late game executes, and it suited a lot of Blade's ideas about the game, but didn't suit some of the players that they have in the server, especially Simple and Electronic. Simple is the best player in the world by far. He's the GOAT of the game, and he is an opper. He is a superstar. When he is on the server, you must pay attention to him because he's going to do some crazy stuff. If you put a leash on him and say, no, you can't do your stuff until the last 15 seconds of the round when we execute our tactic, it leashes your best player. You have to be very careful when you put a leash on your superstars, because them being off the leash is sometimes what makes them a superstar in the first place. They have refined their tactics, though. Blade has developed as a coach with this team. And with their development, they've become a little bit looser, allowed to look for entries with superstars and emerging talents like Bit. But also as a team that is willing to take time to readjust their strat book. So on the right here, you see a calendar. This everything underlined, all of the dates underlined are tournament dates. If you're colorblind, I'm sorry, but the ones in green are the ones that Navi attended, and the ones in red are the ones they did not attend. Boomich and Blade have shown that they're willing to take time between tournaments to make sure they're at their best level, make sure they're not necessarily getting anti-stratted as much as they normally would be if they're going to every single tournament. December 2021, so this is November here. The major ended on like the 4th of November, so they had over 2 weeks to get ready for this tournament on the 24th. This is the Blast Fall final, sorry, November 24th to 28th. Then they had the opportunity to go to the IEM Winter Tournament on the 2nd to 12th. But that would really give them absolutely no time before the Blast World Finals starting on the 14th. Almost no teams did this, but it's how the best teams in the world stay at the highest level. If this team stays this smart, I think they're going to be incredibly difficult to beat in 2022. A lot of compounding factors. are going to make this team really, really dangerous. I haven't talked about Perfecto at all, and that's kind of the whole point. He's a really, really good lurking support player without needing to be mentioned, the same way Zipnik is. Absolutely has to be the top of the conversation for Astralis over 2021. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So Na'Vi, best team. Another CIS team who have been challenging them, though, probably the second best team in all of 2021, was Gambit. Gambit are another team who did not change anything about their roster for this year. Hobbit, Shiro, Axile, Nafany, and Inters. This team was really, really good in the online era. At the start of the year, they were the best team in 2021 as Na'Vi hadn't quite figured out their form. They still had Flamey on the roster, and this Gambit team looked really, really synergistic. What I mean by that is they were on the same page all the time. Hobbit is the most experienced player on this roster by a significant margin. He's by far the most experienced. He's won a major, and he's a little bit older than all of these guys. He has to absolutely lead them in and out of the server. Their in-game leader is Nafany, but Hobbit definitely does take on a lot of that experience, mentorship, captaincy almost of the team. The reason why I like the fact that there's no change for this team, whereas some of the other teams with no changes I might be a little more hesitant about, is because this team was developing for a lot of 2021. They were the best, but they were still getting better. They started to falter and fall off and get surpassed by Na'Vi when it came to when online stopped and tournaments started to become online. Even if crowds weren't there, when they had to go onto the stage, not just in their hotel rooms, you could see some more of the jitters kick in. And then when there was a live audience, they really started to look like a different team altogether. This takes time, though. I'm okay with a really young team taking a couple tournaments to get bedded in, experienced, and feel more comfortable playing in front of live audiences, because it's not something you can practice really easily, and it's happened across many different esports. I remember Mad Lions in League of Legends is a perfect example, where their head coach Mac said before the tournament he did not expect his team to have any stage jitters on the world stage because they'd won the LEC, the regional tournament. And unfortunately, that's like saying an AHL hockey player in the American leagues is going to not have any nerves when he plays on the National Hockey League level. When he plays on the S tier level, it's just not realistic. Whenever there's a step up in competition, there's a step up in expectations, and then if some players don't respond to it well, they'll be they'll be putting their attention on the wrong thing. They'll be focusing on the wrong part of their game, and nerves will creep in. They will get off their game, and we won't have the same performance from teams like Gambit that we should have had it been online. That's why we give this team a little bit of time. Hopefully, they have a really strong coach. This coach Groove is more of a systems coach, a tactical coach. I feel like this team may need more of a mental coach, a leadership figure for them to build upon. They have a great foundation. They have a lot of potential. Shiro and Axile are absolute beasts. I hope they could live up to their potential in 2022. If they do, that would be a really, really good source of regional competition to keep Na'Vi pushing to be the best in every single tournament. The next roster is the third best roster in the CIS region, a dark horse in almost every tournament they entered, but unfortunately it was highly dependent on their form as to whether or not they could execute their dark horse potential. No changes into 2022, but they did have a relatively pretty recent change. Late October 2021, Flit joined the roster. This team is very exciting to watch. Almost every team from the CIS region are exciting because they're so talented. Unfortunately, I have a lot less faith in VP than I do in Gambit or Na'Vi. simply because I don't believe in this team's structural identity as much as I do in the other two teams we talked about. Pnder was a breakout star in 2020-2021. Very, very aggressive, willing to take risks and push boundaries that other players were not. In the online era, this greatly rewarded this whole team as it unlocked their tactics through great information obtained early in the round, or straight up playing a 5v4. Your conversion should go way up if you get to play a 5v4. What started to hold this team back, in my opinion, is two things. The first being, when you break the game with your aggression, it will do just that, break the game. What gamers are really good at, though, is adapting to broken things. I'll go back to League of Legends. Every time they put in a new character, it's broken. The players have to adapt. The new gun, the M4A1S, probably a little bit broken. We have to adapt to that. As Pnder, and another player like him I'm going to mention, Art on Furia, they were extremely aggressive in this online area, but they started to get figured out as the era progressed and teams started to get ready to play against that type of playstyle when they start to play online Counter-Strike instead of highly tactical LAN Counter-Strike. Not tactical, because this is very tactical as well, but more controlled, calm, and maybe some of the pushes that were done online wouldn't be done on LAN. So that's one side to this team. Pnder busts rounds open. Their in-game leader and opper, Jaime, is the complete opposite type of character to Pnder in the server. I don't know anything about them out of the server. In the server, they are the opposite playstyle. Pnder is rifling aggressively to get openings in rounds. Jaime is saving for the next round, saving his expensive weapon to have a better economy for the next round and a better chance then. Unfortunately, when you set yourself up with the tactics and the players you have around you, and you have put yourself in the star position with the star gun to be the last one alive in the round, sometimes you do have to go for the highlight reel play of clutching out a round. I need to see Jaime do that in 2022. Not only do it and try to do it, but actually succeed against players like Shiro, against players like Simple, against players like Zai Wu, or whoever Vitality are going to be setting up to clutch. VP had a great 2021. I think Flit will have to come really online in order for them to keep it going into 2022, unfortunately. I still do expect this team to be the third best in their region, but that's only because the teams below them lack the same cohesion and strength in all 5 roles. I do think all 5 of these players are talented. It's how they come together in the server that has questions. So let's jump off the CIS region, which is mostly Russia, Ukraine, a little bit of Latvia and Kazakhstan, and go into Europe, the entire continental Europe. This is the most diverse and competitive region in the league, relatively. They don't have the very best team, that's a Navi. They might have had the number 2 team. If not Gambit, they did have the number 2 team, if we're not saying it's Gambit. The diversity and strength for a really long time of the European region makes it the best region. They weren't the top region in 2022, but they are the best region, or in 2021. But they are the best region. It's a difference. This is a good point. English speaking versus non-English speaking rosters. Some are nationalistic. Some are, just speaking Russian or just speaking French or German. Others are more fluid. I'm going to be mostly focused, if you can't tell by this list, on the top tier of European Counter-Strike. So let's start with, if not Gambit, the second best team, sorry. If it's not Gambit, this is the second best team in 2021. Just based on how they finished the year. They had a quote-unquote dead roster coming into the last couple tournaments and came and did really, really well, as I note here. Third, first, and second in the last 3 tournaments of the year. With a dead team, a team that was not, that the team knew they were not going to be together for 2022, so they left it all out there in 2021. When the team does this, the dead team outperforms expectations, it only ramps up further the expectations on this Vitality roster. And the expectations were already extremely high. So Zai Wu and Apex and Masuda are the 3 members staying. Dupree and Magisk are coming from the 4-time major winning back-to-back Astralis, as well as their coach Sonic. So Vitality loses Kyojin, Shox, and Xtaz. On paper, if you take Shox, Kyojin for Magisk and Dupree, you're almost always going to take Dupree and Magisk just because of Kyojin's performance. It was not up to a tier 1 level. However, Xtaz did a lot for this team from the outside perspective. Both Masuda and Kyojin were relatively new additions to this team, and the French coach Xtaz was able to get a lot out of those French players. If Masuda can keep his level going, and Sonic is able to integrate himself and ingratiate himself into this team, Vitality ceiling could be as high as it was last year. Sorry, higher than it was last year. That's the whole point of making this trade, especially when you're subbing out Kyojin. You're bringing in absolute superstars into Dupree and Magisk with a lot of name recognition that are being expected to outperform. If they cannot challenge or even surpass Na'Vi, I do think that would be a massive, massive failure for this team. Well, I think they should be able to get it going right off the jump. I am willing to give this team a month or 2 to ramp up, just because there are 2 very big clashes of style and identity coming together here. Zai Wu, Apex, and Masuda, very French under Xtaz. Apex is a very emotional player and thrives off that emotion. Dupree is an emotional player as well, but I think sometimes gets a bit tilted off that emotion. Magisk can be a rock, but will he be able to secondary call well with Apex? Lots of question marks around identity, hierarchy, and tactical control with this team. It's going to be entirely up to them, though, to get good and execute. I did mention about English here, just because Zai Wu and Masuda are unknowns to me. Zai Wu was very apprehensive to give an interview or even a word in English, and I have not heard Masuda at all. Just very under talked about in the scene when he's surrounded by players like, now Dupree, Magic, and Zai Wu. That's all I want to talk about Vitality. I'm very eager to see where Xtaz ends up and what he does with his next roster. Will it be international? Will he stay French? I'm not sure. G2. G2. Another team with really high expectations on them. G2 were supposed to be assembling the super team last year with Nexa and Hunter, Nico, Amanek, and Jax. Didn't quite work out as Na'Vi found super team status. Also, there was Kenny S in that roster too, in that original super team, where I think Jax or Amanek came out, but then Kenny S had to go down for motivation issues. So G2 had a bit of a rocky 2020-2021. They're looking to bounce back big and in pure G2 fashion, not shy away from spending a lot of money or make it look like they're going after the biggest stars that are available. So 1-for-1 role of replacements in this team. In-game leader, Nexa's out for Alexi B. Just a 1-to-1 swap with OG. Nexa's now in-game leading for them, and Alexi's coming over to G2. In the op position, this is the biggest question mark, but also the greatest upside for G2. This is where they are going to gain ground on teams like Na'Vi and Vitality is in this op position. One sec. So m0NESY is coming from Na'Vi Junior, which is Na'Vi's academy team, and we will be talking about the academy teams and leagues at the end. But m0NESY is being touted as a player who actually may have the raw mechanical potential to one day maybe be as good as Zai Wu or Simple, which is absolutely insane that we would be speaking about a player who has played less than 50 games in Tier 1 at that level. I didn't mention it on the Vitality slide, but this player, Zai Wu, is the star opper of this team and allows them to be really good. Same way Shiro is for Gambit, Zai Wu is for Vitality, and Simple is for Na'Vi. So I should almost do a slide by itself of oppers, where it's Simple, number 1, Zai Wu, number 2, and then maybe Shiro, number 3 from 2021. That is really, really, really high praise, but also great expectations for this young, unproven talent to come in and hit the ground running and be able to, in the server, compete with these whole teams built around, Zai Wu or Shiro or Simple. Also, Alexi B has a massive test on his shoulders as well. This is going to be 2 big tests on the 2 new members for G2 because expectations are high. Nico is one of the best riflers in the world. Nico is his cousin and backed him up fantastically on G2 last year. And then Jax is the glue guy support role. Nico's entry is insane for how good of a superstar he is. Hunter follow-up, fantastic. Okay, Alexi B's play calling, shot calling on his teams like Ents, Avangar, or were they Avangar? Ents for sure, and OG more recently for the past year and a half has been very controlled, and maybe in a sense held OG back from some potential. Where OG are a very frag heavy team, Alexi is a very strat heavy IGL. I do think there could be a clash of styles and identities between Alexi B and Nico. Nico has been a character before. In the past, I'll give him in the past, times have changed, he could have developed. But in the past, he has not gotten along super well with his in-game leaders before, like Kerrigan on Mouse Sports, or Face Clan, not Mouse. It eventually led to Nico Sports. Well, I think this team will be expected to hit the ground running because they're G2, and G2 have really high expectations on themselves, and their fans have really high expectations on them. I don't think this team will actually be able to do it the way maybe Vitality could with their coaching. There's a couple of reasons why I don't think they can build that synergy off the start. One of them is Alexi B and Nico. The other one is m0NESY and his unprovenness at Tier 1. The third one, though, is their coaching staff. I've mentioned this once before about... I mentioned this a couple times, actually. Coaching is very, very important in these team environments. The players have to be friendly and friends with one another to an extent, but willing to tell each other that they're wrong and incorrect and come to amicable solutions to things. I'm just going to jump in real quick from the editing floor and let all of you know that Xtaz is coaching this roster. So that is fantastic news for all of G2 fans. It means that this is all wrong. And this team probably will hit the ground running to some extent with this core of Nico, Jax, Hunter. That'll give them the firepower they need to give Alexi time to bed in, m0NESY time to ramp up, and Xtaz as an oversight. I think the tactics of this team are going to be really, really solid. Probably, losing Malik is tough, but Xtaz is a fantastic pickup. Oh my goodness, I'm so, so, so pleased. Malik's going to EG, and that's going to be a massive test for him to get those boys motivated again. If there's a coach who can do it, though, it would be a player coach like Malik doing it. So I do like that decision by EG, but this is pretty incorrect for G2 now that Xtaz is coaching them. Awesome, awesome stuff for G2. Love the move. This is the start of a background series I like to call the Dark Sun. because it's a looming, scary shadow that's hanging over teams that have this background. And it's all tied to the op. I probably could given this background to m0NESY on G2, but I have some faith in m0NESY's raw mechanical talent. This heroic roster, I fear, could be capped by their potential to match up in the op position. When you have those top three I just talked about, I've talked about and keep talking about them, Simple, Zai Wu, Shiro, you absolutely need to bring in an opper who can, if not compete with them now, shows the potential to one day grow into that role and be a superstar that can compete with them. Unfortunately, I don't think rosters with this background can do it, right? This dark sun can do it. Heroic is one of those rosters. Cadian, Refresh, Stown, Tessez, and Shush. Same roster. This roster came 3rd to 4th at the major. But again, I think that is the absolute top limit for this team, unfortunately. Without an opper who can compete or beat Simple, Zai Wu, Shiro. 3rd, 4th at the major would give them confidence to not want to change their roster. But my perspective is that they're going to need to innovate somehow if they're not going to change their roster. They have to change their tactics. They have to change their style. They have to change something about how they approach the best teams in the world, or they're going to keep losing to the best teams in the world. The reason why the op is so powerful and important is because it's one of the most expensive guns. There's lots of heads up 1v1s between the two snipers. The weapon is the most expensive and recoups a lot of gold per kill. Their IGL is also their opper, which is another level of difficulty where you have to not only be the best player in the server, you also have to lead your team and their tactics in their mid rounds. And that's Cadian. He's a very, very experienced veteran player. That's a double-edged sword, right? It's working really well for Gambit and Hobbit, where they have that experience with a lot of young talent. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of young talent on this heroic roster. Stown's been really, really good. Shush is a consistent supporter player, less young. Refresh is an upcoming talent. However, the downside to experience is some of your raw mechanical skill usually falls off. And this is completely anecdotal and probably unfair to bring up in this example, but I just have anecdotal experience of watching Cadian stream and him losing 1v1 rifle duels to players like Bialy, who's another washed up, really old experienced player from top mid Mirage, right by those boxes. What I see to be about a 50-50 gunfight should be really, really comfortable. And if Heroic are not able to convert those types of kills and clutches cleanly, consistently, regardless of their really high highs, I do fear this team will struggle a little bit in 2022. And don't get me wrong, this team had incredibly high highs in 2021. Usurping Astralis as the best team in Denmark is definitely not an easy task. Refresh had a sick, was it 4v1, 5v1 spray clutch versus Liquid as they kind of trolled. Cadian had an insane clutch at the major with the rifle on Mirage. Given all of the potential talent and flashes of brilliance this team can show, I do fear there is a dark sun looming over them in that op position. Next team, FaZe. FaZe Clan. Really disappointing 2021. They were making blockbuster move after blockbuster move. When I thought they brought in twists from Team Liquid, I thought this team had done enough to become seriously a top 3 team in the world. Didn't happen. Safe to say, did not happen. Did not happen on LAN, They were better on LAN, but it definitely wasn't happening online. So in terms of changes, this team got rid of Olofmeister, who had overstayed his welcome, if we're being honest. Bringing in Rops gives this team a lot more firepower in the server. You now have Twists and Rops as your primary stars, with Brokey opping to back them up. Usually, oppers have to be a superstar. However, when you have such good riflers like G2 are looking to have with Hunter and Nico, or FaZe Clan have with Twists and Rops, your opper, as long as he's not missing the shots he has to hit, you're fine. As long as he's able to convert on clutch rounds, you're fine. Brokey can be that player, in my opinion. The same way m0NESY hopefully can as well. Let's talk a little bit about the addition. Rops is a top 20 player, so he's rated the top 20 in the world for 3 years in a row on teams that went from promising to good to dumpster fires. That's impressive. So it's an upgrade over Olaf in literally every metric. Olaf has more experience, but Rops doesn't lack experience, so there's no real gain there. Before I talk about Olaf, I think this Rops move is enough to propel this team to the top. There are no more excuses for FaZe Clan. If this roster can't get it done, it's time for more. It's time to either blow it up or retirement. Seriously, for one of these two players up top. This roster, I believe, has the firepower to match up with anybody on LAN. They just need to go out and do it. They need to keep their motivation high. They need to stay honest. They need a good coaching staff to keep them on top of their tactics. They have the money to spend. No excuses. Now let me just go on a little tangent about Olofmeister. Actually, let's just read this real quick, and we'll come back to it later, because I'm going to talk about it later. Olaf has given a lot to the game, and should be training the next generation of talent with players like Forrest or Freiberg, instead of camping on large paychecks from orgs that are receiving venture capital funds. These venture capital orgs seem to be content doling out large salaries for underwhelming performances. I am looking at teams like Dignitas or FaZe Clan when I say this. Envy was a perfect example when they were in the scene. If you want to be in the scene and you want to farm clout, build a streaming empire. Build a content empire. If you want to be in the scene and develop young talent, do that then. Maybe get one veteran like Centaur and develop that person. If you want to be the best, you have to draft and build the best. Not the best 5 years ago, the best for next year, for the next tournament, for the next game. I have no idea what strategy Dignitas are trying, besides be Swedish-ish, kind of, with a bunch of Norwegians. Oh, okay. Next team, OG. This team went through a turbulent offseason. Between 2021 and 2022, this team fluctuated from, in my opinion, from being a top 50 team in the league to a top 15 team in, when I say league, I mean world. There was a time when I heard a rumor that they were going to be losing Valde and Alexi B, which in my opinion would gut the heart and soul from this team. However, I do like how scrappy OG are in the scene. They're not spending the most money, but they're able to get the most out of their rosters. Alexi B helped them do that. They've lost him to G2 for no doubt a good bit of money and Nexa in return. This will give their team a very different identity, probably more scrappy. Keeping Valde was the other side to this. So a new IGL plus keeping their star player makes me have some hope for this team to be a top 15, maybe pushing top 10 team in the league, in the world. Next, it will give them more firepower, a very different identity. Alexi is a IGL that is very tactics based, where you're moving as a unit and you're almost like a nebulous blob that is constantly putting micro pressures out into the map to see how the feedback is from the environment, or what defense are you running, what information can I gather, and what tactics can we set up to exploit. Nexa on G2 was more of a go out, get a frag, we'll build from there, building around his stars and picks and kills. Much less structured than Alexi. This could either help or hurt OG. I do hope that Flames can keep popping off, come really online, and project himself into conversation as an upcoming young talent. Got a little bit overshadowed by players like Bit last year. Mantu, I just want to see more from him against the top competition. He's an op, and as I said, they're that top three of oppers, but then there's a lot of uncertainty below that top three. Outside of Simple, Zai Wu, and Shiro, we've got players like Monacy looking to step up, Cadian still looking to prove themselves. I think Mantu can carve out his name as one of those big people we have to pay attention to. I do like this point I made, though, about a consistent best through a tournament, or let alone a string of months. This team has always had dark horse potential with OG, or with LXCB, and I don't know if that helps with Nexa. That's what that should be. It'll be a different identity. If the team hits form and can start feeling themselves, they could start fragging with anybody, maybe, besides Navi. Or, yeah, besides maybe, what are some other really high fragging teams? Like, I see Vitality more structured. Gambit a little bit more structured. Heroic, maybe? No, probably a little bit more structured. This team can throw some stuff at the wall. I hope it sticks. Astralis. Again, you notice the background, right? That dark looming AWP specter. Astralis are electing for no change in 2022. I think this is not correct. If it were up to me, Lucky would be going back down to the academy team, the Astralis talent team, for more LAN experience. This team re-upped right at the end of 2021, though. After Magisk and Dupree are leaving for Vitality, Astralis do a great move and take Config and Blame F from Complexity. Complexity don't have any say in the matter because Config and Blame F wanted to go. Part of that nationalities and European loyalty that comes into that scene exists in the Brazilian scene as well. This Astralis name is different to the Astralis brand. So the Astralis brand is the best team in Counter-Strike and has been for 4 years in a row with Glaive, Zipnix, Dupree, Magisk, and Device. Device is now on NIP. Magisk and Dupree are on Vitality. The two players left are Glaive and Zip. I love the additions of Config and Blame F. They've been actually the two best players on the team since coming. However, I do fear this team lacks the ability to compete in the top 5 level consistently without a star opper. Maybe Lucky can grow into that role. However, I do see him already being surpassed by people like Montu or people like Monacy, maybe even OC from North America. Be a big year for him. If he can last till the end of the year and this team isn't a dumpster fire, I think it'll be off the back of Lucky not feeding. Config is going to have to carry big in this team. They also have 2 in-game leaders, or 2 people who can in-game lead, so I expect their tactics to either be flawless or a completely jumbled mess. I hope Blame can suit into a secondary calling role, or maybe Glaive retires at the end of the year and Blame F is his replacement. This is a transition year for Astralis. I don't know if Glaive and Zipnix can recapture the form that they showed on the best team that has ever played this game. I don't think that's too far of a stretch to say. because it's an incredibly high level they reached and a difficult task to reclaim. The next team is Fnatic. Now, Fnatic are really, really exciting to me because they're trying new things, they're pushing boundaries, and they're an international roster that aren't afraid of being international, of embracing their wild side. So their roster is Alex, Crims, Mezzy, Brolan, and Smooya. The only players sticking around from the old roster are Crims and Brolan. The only two players you would keep around after that golden JW, that LAN team tried to take their strats to the online environment, and it fell flat on its face. You could see that motivation was down, tactics were not clean and crisp. They weren't in 2021. And then players like Art and Yakindar, those aggressive players, Yakindar I mentioned before, were the types of teams, and Gambit were the types of strategies that destroyed that old Fnatic roster. They just got exploited too hard in the LAN environment. So what Fnatic did is very savvy. They weren't spending the most, but they were spending smart money. Brolin is a very talented player. Mezzy is Crims is captain consistent on this team, untiltable. Build off those two core pieces and accentuate them with the Cloud9 roster that collapsed. Alex and Mezzy were big pieces of that. Alex had to op in that Cloud9 role after Woxic was kicked, again for motivation in the online environment. Again, coaching is an issue. But where Alex had to op, he was being pulled away from his in-game leading duties, kind of like Cadian on Heroic. However, this new Fnatic with Smooya, now Smooya is an absolute character in his own right. Any team he is on, that team has an instant character to it because he's on that team. Smooya has been attitude questionable for a long time, but in my opinion, that's just poor coaching and immaturity in the esports scene. This team has a lot of potential to swing above their name recognition and weight class in 2022 and carve themselves out as a top 10 team consistently. I say that consistently under Alex and Crims's leadership. This team has an insane amount of firepower, budding and developing firepower. It's going to be up to Alex and Crims to get the absolute most in both role, like position on the map, and firepower from Mezzy, Brolin, and definitely Smooya. Mezzy showed great promise on Cloud9 in an anchor role as a very stable clutch player that was beyond his years in experience. Calm, cool, and collected, like the Fnatic style. Brolan, great rifler, developing talent, a little bit of a regression in 2021, but how much of that is him versus the team collapsing around him, we can't know. Smooya came off Movistar Riders. He got cut from another middling team. He's been everywhere. He's been on Big. He's been on Movistar. He's been Godsend. He's been everywhere. I hope this is his home for a while now. I don't think I have anything else to say. This team definitely can be a consistent top 10 team in the world if they play well. They're going to be struggling to keep up with the the Navis and the Vitalities of the world, but that doesn't mean they can't give them a great game and keep them honest, keep them improving. Mezzy especially, I really, really like how calm, cool, and composed he was and how much that impressed me on Cloud9. He came from, I think, the Godsend UK roster and was just beyond his years in how he played. Mouse are a team that is very frustrating to watch as an outside spectator. Someone who can't know their financials, but obviously sees they don't spend as much. This team has been up and down throughout the years, right? From Mouse Sports, the Nico Sports days, they've had really, really talented rosters over the years. But it seems like recently they've had to take a step back and get a little more economically focused. So this is not changing in 2022. We're losing Acor and Rops. The two biggest names on this lineup are leaving. But, but, I think that's actually going to be good for Mouse in the long term. This is going to be more of a development here for Mouse, and one where they go back to their fundamentals and find out what makes them a great org and competitive and what makes people want to cheer for them. Losing your best player in Rops sucks. He was going to leave anyways. He wanted out. They were at least able to get a little bit of money in return, from my understanding, from my outside perspective. I could be wrong about that, but that's okay. The other one that they lost was Acor. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, Acor could just never show the form he did on Mad Lions on Mouse. He was really, really highly touted prospect coming from Mad Lions to Mouse Sports, and just never was able to produce the same effect in the server. This does look like the worst roster move on paper, for sure, by far and away. A lot of people are going to write off this team as a result. However, I think that there are some elements to this team that might appear ugly on paper could work. I don't think there's a high probability they will, or even if it does work, that could bring them to a level that even competes. This team is trying something new, and I don't hate it because I know the talent they have in their academy roster, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. I'll talk a lot about it later, a little bit of it now. Torzi is getting pulled up from the NXT lineup. Mao's NXT are the best Academy League team. I don't think that's a controversial statement. Even though NIP have ZTR and Linus on their lineup, who are both Tier 1 experienced players, Mao's NXT are better. Torzi is one of the players who's coming up. There are two other players, Shui and Shane, who I think do have the potential to come up. I'll talk more about those two players later. One of them is the in-game leader for the NXT team, so it's tough. The other player that's coming in for Mao's is NBK. So Torzi and NBK. On paper, massive, underwhelming signings. Torzi as like a, okay, let's see what you can do, but I don't have any expectations now because we don't know you. And NBK was not able to get double pony to the place it wanted to be after he got kicked from Vitality, I think. If NBK can get back to any semblance of leadership and talent, we could have a good team here. But this team already has an in-game leader in Dexter. So NBK has to become a secondary caller that does not disrupt the synergy that Mao's already have established between Dexter, Frozen, and BMS. If this team does do good, it has to be off high fragging performances from players like Frozen, BMS, and Torzi. I do think this team has a massive firepower problem where maybe Dexter can get a couple kills, and as an Australian, that's really impressive. I don't think NBK's fragging has been there. And that will get exposed even more when he takes a step up from Double Pony to Tier 1 against Navi, Gambit, Vitality. It's a really, really tough, top-heavy field in 2022. Teams have started to assemble super teams to compete with Navi. So that means the teams that didn't are going to struggle a little bit in that top 15 air, top 50, let's be more general. So like top 25 to top 10. Those 15 teams are going to be mixy. We could see a lot of variability. Nip. Nip, nip, nip. What is there to say about this lineup besides this organization has clearly recommitted to the Counter-Strike space. They went and got arguably the best player in the world in Device. I think that's a losing argument to a lot of players, but you could probably still make that argument in 2021 that Device can elevate your team as one of the best players in the world. When Device came in, Esseteg was not on this roster, so this is a little bit misleading. It was actually Linus, I think, or ZTR. Both of them have been up there with Device in the roster. Both of them are now on the Academy team. When Nip committed for this play, there was a lot of stuff happening for the whole org. They were committing for Device. They were announcing an LPL League of Legends spot. That's just something in the esports scene, a League of Legends Chinese franchise roster spot. They were announcing that this announcement of Device was not the biggest announcement of the year, that they were going to announce a bigger announcement later that turned out to be them being publicly traded on the stock exchange. What those three moves tell me from an organizational standpoint is Navi are trying to elevate their status in the echelon of esports organizations from an org that's maybe closer to Mouse's level, that is up there with Cloud9, Team Liquid, G2, Navi, OG, not OG, sorry. Maybe OG for Dota, but not really. Not really at all. Other top orgs, though. Unfortunately, in Counter-Strike, at least, I'm not speaking on anything else because I'm not as knowledgeable. It has somewhat worked and somewhat blown up in their face. So the Device move didn't instantly propel this team to the greatest heights. It looked a lot better, but there were still holes that needed to be patched. Esseteg came in over ZTR or LNZ at the time, after LNZ replaced ZTR, and both of them are now on the Academy team. That did not propel this team over again. It doesn't mean they can't, doesn't mean they won't in a couple tournaments. I just don't know if these 5 members, Device, Hampus, Esseteg, Plopsky, and Rez, can consistently put in the LAN performances needed to beat a team like Vitality. Not even the best team, but Vitality. I think Vitality's in-game leadership will put them a step above, along with Zai Wu in the server, competing with Device. I've left Device off that top 3 list of oppers. I don't know if that's just oversight on my behalf, or if Device has taken a step back in 2021 from the impact he had on Astralis. Maybe that just goes to show how good Astralis were at setting up one of the best operas in the world to hit his shots. But it'll look to be a bounce back year for Device, again, to establish himself up there in the conversation. Because he wasn't even up there in the conversation with the best players in the world, like he normally is, with Simple, Zai Wu, riflers like Nico, which wasn't there. Even Bit, I heard a lot more talk about Bit than Device this year, and that worries me a little bit. Not to speak out of school too much, but there obviously were some extracurricular stuff outside the server happening for Device. Unfortunately, I can only judge him off the stuff that happens in the server, so he made the choice to go to Ninjas. He has to be the best player he can if he wants my respect. Sorry. Big. Next team is big. This team is a lot like Mouse. Actually, less like Mouse. Worse than Mouse in that sense. Lower than Fnatic even, probably, in how much money they have to spend on the scene. They have kind of hamstrung themselves into the German ethos with Berlin international gaming being not really international and mostly just German. You know, Berlin, German. This team going into 2022 is Tizian, Kido, Favin, Surison, and Tabson. At the 2021, they switched out, they brought in Gade, and now Gade is out. That's not a great sign, right? From one year to the next year, you're just replacing your bottom performing piece every year after year. But unfortunately, it's kind of the reality Big have hamstrung themselves into. Favin is another German, obviously, because Big are staying German. Gade was brought in to bring them back to German, like no more English, and it's so hard to from the outside to try and interpret whether or not that actually had a massive impact on their game, whether it was a honeymoon effect. But this team peaked at top one during the online era in 2021. I think that's a massive feather in their cap. I think that is extreme overperformance from this organization that does not put the same amount of money, cannot put the same amount of money into the scene that G2 can. And they outperformed them. They reached higher highs than G2 did. That's insane. Was G2 actually a number one in the world? I know they came second in a couple tournaments, but did they ever get the number one team spot? I could be wrong about that. I could probably correct myself on that. But again, that doesn't take away from the point that Big overperformed a lot of expectations by making it the top one in the world. Yes, during online era. Yes, unsustainably, but it happened. I am a Counter-Strike purist, and I just want to see the best possible Counter-Strike. Unfortunately, it does mean that when I see superstars like Tabson and Searson, when they're on form, I do sometimes have the impression that they're being held back just a little bit by this org and the inability to lock down superstars to help the stars build and build and build. Ideally, in my perfect world, Berlin International Gaming would adopt the I in big. Yes. Look for upgrades, get away from German, get away from Germany. It's obviously you stay in Berlin because there's infrastructure there. But it is so hard to compete. I think Eternal Fire can tell you that. It's really, really difficult. And this is really good too. Like their performance is always really good. That's why they're on this line. You know, while Tyloo and Movistar riders do not have slides on this slideshow, Big are overperforming to get their slide and me to talk about how good they are. Okay, that's the end of Europe. That's going to end off the European cycle. A lot of European teams, before I just to close it off, a lot of European teams did go international, did look to build a super team to beat Navi, to compete with Gambit. That was Europe. This is North America. Another slide with too much words on it, I know. But this is important because there are a lot of developing storylines in the North American scene. One of them was match fixing in MDL. Yuck. Disgusting. That's something that has to be purged from all competition, right? Cheating has no place in any competition. Yuck. There is an investigation ongoing into it, but if I'm being honest, a little bit doomer-pilled, I don't see huge repercussions coming down to shake up the whole North American scene anytime soon. Rather unfortunately. On top of the match fixing, ruining Shaking Faith, we lost organizations. Cloud9 paused their involvement after they spent a lot of money on publicly available salaries. When you release your salary numbers and other players are in contract negotiations, that can drastically affect their negotiation. If they see Esatag is getting paid $40,000 a month, that's a reason to overinflate your ego. And maybe like 00 Nation did, the ex-MIBR roster, they just ask for way too much money. Maybe Copenhagen Flames do the same thing after the major. Start asking for way too much money because of individual outliers like this. Cloud9 blamed COVID for not being able to assemble the team or train the way they wanted as part of a Twitter thing. I was not impressed by that, but I wasn't impressed by a lot of North America this year. Envy closed the curtain, and the rest of the Flashpoint orgs are spinning their wheels. The Flashpoint project was mostly North American. Obviously, Mad Lions are in there, MIBR are in there. I'm bringing this up in the North American slide because Flashpoint was a complete and utter disaster. North America lost some young talent to Valorant. Some have returned. Some were names that were never going to return. like players, moonlighting at the end of their careers in a new game. Um, but overall, I think we weathered this one pretty well, especially with signs when complexity are coming back to the scene, the regional scene. Sorry. The teams that were established in North America, so we talked a lot about the nonsense and negatives. The establishment of North America did not progress the scene in any measurable way. Liquid and EG in 2020 were the best two teams of North America and were actually relevant on the international stage. That was not the case in 2021. Liquid had the odd tournament or showing, but it was a very, very down year for those two orgs. And then Complexity was a bit of an unfortunate dumpster fire where they assembled the Juggernaut and um, we're looking really, really strong, actually. That Juggernaut of Oboe, Rush, Breeze. No, sorry. Oboe, Rush, Config, BlameF, and who was that fifth? Coached by Kita. Stanislaw. Obviously, they're IGL. That roster. No, that's EG. Oh my god. Who was Complexity's fifth? I'm totally blanking. I'll think of it. That roster fell apart, unfortunately. Completely fell apart when Oboe left. They were just listless. NATO Sapphics was stepping in for a tournament. I'm pretty sure. Like it was not good. The way they had to replace Oboe was with patchwork band-aids instead of building up endemic talent. And hopefully Complexity learned from that. Grim was on TL, so they couldn't bring him in. But there were options. Unfortunately, Extra Salt, Bad News Bears, and Party Astronauts had to be the Tier 2 orgs to carry Tier 1 North American CS. That's straight up what happened. It was not pretty. It was really, really, really ugly. North America need to get some respect back on the international stage because they performed just as bad or worse than Brazil. Yuck. Liquid. This team is very, very wait and see for me. I want to slag them off. I want to call them to the dirt for doing stuff like this, for having a lack of pure, for having a lack of identity, ultimately. This seems like the Elige show, where we're satisfying Elige and trying to keep the fans happy with some young talent. I don't know if this lineup does anything in North America, or outside of North America, sorry. Shox, Nitro, NAF, Elige, OC. When you're building a core around NAF Fly and Elige, you have outstandingly spectacular riflers. Kind of like FaZe Clan, they have twists and ROPs now. They didn't start with those, but they have a really strong rifling core. How do they accentuate that core will tell you how good the team can be. With Elige and NAF, with twists and ROPs, you are almost guaranteed to be a top 15 team in the world on firepower alone from 2 members of your 5-man team. The accentuation of Liquid is a bit weird to me, and I'm going to talk about that. Shox is a player who is having a bit of a renaissance in his career. Coming from Vitality, he was looking really, really good at the end of 2021 as a bit of a lurker role, maybe a little bit of secondary calling. He was reinventing his gameplay and playstyle as a wily veteran, and I think is a great, great leader if he has his mind in the right place, if he's got motivation, if he's happy and excited to work like he clearly was on Vitality. Apex was able to get the most out of him, and Shox was able to help the development of young players like Hyojin and Masuda. I hope he has that same passion for this North American project instead of the French one. Him speaking English, no problems. Well, obviously secondary language, but I don't see it to be the same problem. Nitro's coming back from Valorant. By far the most questionable decision for Liquid's offseason. This one will need to be proven in the server. Cannot be proven on paper to me because the way Nitro left the CS scene and now the way he's coming back do not instill a lot of hope and faith in me. There were rumors behind the scene that Elysian Nitro were hooking up in 2022 no matter what, whether it be on Liquid in CS or in Valorant on another roster, maybe like 100 Thieves. I don't know. Nitro came from 100 Thieves Valorant back to Liquid Counter-Strike. That's not going to be a seamless transition, and it's not like Nitro was performing out of his mind when he left anyway. Outside of in-game leadership and experience for players like OC, I don't know if Nitro will be able to make it worth the investment in him on this roster that is competing to be one of the best in the world. That is the level I am holding them up to with the core of NAF and Elige. You bring in a player like Shox, again, you are still competing to be a best in the world org, best in the world lineup. The Nitro pick does raise some questions about the potential ceiling for this org. The one that I don't think is going to gate their ceiling is actually going to be OC. OC is an incredibly important position with the op, but has all the pieces around him to succeed, in my opinion. If he can hit the ground running and show that he can tangle with maybe not Simple and Zai Wu in month one, if he's up there with Monacy and Cadian, I am okay with that. He cannot get outdone in North America by Cirque. Cirque's going to have to come back to his old form in 2022 because he wasn't good in 2021, but OC has to find a way to beat him. If that happens, so I guess actually OC does highly gate this team ceiling. This team might entirely be about OC. OC could be the entire key to the puzzle of this puzzle, the piece of the puzzle that unlocks this roster. Oh my. Even if Nitro cannot frag at tier 1, he's going to be in an in-game leader position. Maybe a bit like Hunden. Maybe he can be a pseudo Hunden. At the top level, though, you need all 5 players to get something in the server. And that will be very hard to do against Navi. Okay, a little bit about social hierarchies. NAF definitely will not be causing problems. OC's a pretty meek, mild-mannered kid. Yeah. I do think the NA talents coming up generally have pretty solid heads on their shoulders, which is not something I could have said for a lot of previous North American talents coming up. I do like Grimm's response to getting called out by Stewie in that interview. It's just like, I see it a different way, like a bit unfair, whatever. Very well done. OC's a similar type of character where calm, cool, and collected, accepts the loss. He's willing to accept when he is not the best person on the server in a given day. I really, really like that. Comes from experience. Floppy, maybe another type of character who maybe old North American perspective would be a tilt lord, a memer, a joker, not taking it seriously. Him coming back to CS from Valorant and finding his passion again, finding a roster now in complexity we can talk about, I think is really, really good for the North American scene. But let's just keep focusing on Liquid. Enough about the talents. This team is going to take a little bit of time to come together. But again, that ceiling on OC, Nitro's going to have to unlock that ceiling. Shox is going to have to help unlock that ceiling with pressure on the other side of the map. A lot rests on OC's shoulders. Maybe a lot of North American hope rests on his shoulders. I've been saying this sentence about Liquid for a couple of years now. This organization builds rosters in a bunch of different sports to compete. Esports, obviously, League of Legends is the classic one. Builds to compete to win. You just must go execute in the server. The one thing I haven't put on a point is Adren is still coaching, as far as I'm concerned, and I've been reserving judgment on Adren for a number of years now. He's had insanely talented players. I need him to start getting the most out of those players to be the best in the world, to maybe beat Astralis eventually, like back in the 2019 run. When Moses came in, I don't know if Moses actually had the agency to do what he needed to do with that many ecos in the lineup. Fallen, Stu, jeez, yeah, tough. Fallen, Stu, Liege, Naf, Grim. You got Naf and Grim who are not going to give you any feedback. And you have 3 players who are going to be prickly, especially in the server, right? Where Moses didn't have that pedigree in the server that Adren does. Even though Adren did it like 10 years ago, whatever. Okay, this needs to be well coached. Needs to be a well coached team. I don't know if it will be. EG. This roster, I had to do a second take, or a third take, and a fourth take when I saw the CEO, quote unquote, leak it on Twitter. The EG roster in the year 2022 is going to field Cirque and Breeze, who are sticking around from last year, Automatic, Rush, and Stewie 2K. The beginning was okay, because those are pieces we're carrying over who we feel can recapture old form that they didn't have last year. And the end was okay. Stewie 2K is one of the most prolific and successful North American players to ever touch Counter-Strike. It's the middle 2 pieces where I start to raise some questions. If you look at Liquid, they got 4 veterans and a rookie. EG have gone with just 5 veteran players. I don't know where the spark is going to come for this team to keep them happy and excited and wanting to improve every day, or even believing that they can improve every day. I don't know if Automatic or Rush said different in servers, in interviews, I mean, but I don't know if these players are coming in and saying, I can get better every single day, because they've been doing it for years and years and years. Automatic's going to have to get better every single day, coming back from Valorant. And even just on the last time he played Counter-Strike on Gen G, that roster was very underwhelming. They would do a couple things in a couple North American tournaments, but then as soon as they had any competition that was of any standing, the team would fall apart completely. And that was with players like Automatic, Kusta, Daps, a little bit towards the experience side of things, with Ben Tet bringing that spark. I do have massive question marks about Automatic. I do have worries about Rush's ability to frag if he can't just be given the absolute baby support role in every single position. I don't know if Rush's intangibles are as needed on this roster with these 4 other veterans who understand they have to sacrifice a little bit. Like, I think the Automatic Rush position is redundant. I think you take one or the other, put them in that position, because unless Automatic can frag, unless Automatic can massively surprise me and frag his mind off. Stewie 2K calling, again, I'm going to be reserving my judgment. He's going to have to get Cirque and Breeze highly motivated again. They were incredibly demotivated over 2021, and we saw the results in the server. They were not impressive. This roster is going to have to come in and instantly establish a... They're going to have to come in and establish a... what's it called? A culture from the top down that inspires confidence and hope and pressure, a little bit of pressure to get good and stay good. I don't know. I really have high questionable doubts about this team to even crack the top 10. And if they do crack it, Can they stay in it? Can Cirque and Breeze maintain great form, which they'll need to have? And I'm questioning if OC can even outcompete Cirque, right? Like, that's not high praise for Cirque to be up there like he was with the best in the world. Tough, really tough for North America so far. But there is a little bright light at the end of the tunnel. It's pretty far down the tunnel, right? It might take a little bit of time for the train to arrive and smack us right in the face with its talent. But there is a light at the end of this tunnel. And it comes in complexity. Complexity have reinvested in the North American scene. The North American region has hope again. We no longer have to rely on Tier 2 orgs propagating Tier 1 talent. Complexity are investing in Extra Salt's core of JT, Fang, and Floppy. Marky is gone, and OC is on Liquid. Sonic is also still on Extra Salt. I'm glad he's staying behind in the Tier 2 talent. Hopefully he can keep bringing up young players. But he's not a Tier 1 talent yet. Sonic is not a Tier 1 talent, period. But Complexity can be a Tier 1 talent because they have a lot of upside. This team is going to start at like top 50 in the world, and I hope by the end of the year they can make it to top 10. That would be stupendous. That would be so good. This team has a lot to prove, a lot of redemption stories, a lot of unproven Tier 1 looks. I think by the end of the year, this could be the best team in North America. Could be the most it is the most promising to develop the furthest. From where they're starting to where they're going to end, Complexity are going to go the furthest. I hope their coaching staff can get the most out of it. This team is taking a core with solid fundamentals for Tier 2 and has to bring them up to the Tier 1 level. JT fragging is the biggest question mark of this whole riddle, this whole puzzle. JT has had trouble in Tier 2 North American scene finding frags. Doing it in Tier 1 international is not going to be easy. It's possible, and he has improved over the past couple months. So I do hold out some hope as he keeps practicing, as the coaching staff can, with like TC, can take some of the responsibility off him with the Complexity backing, get some more strategic analysts in, more people to anti-strat for you. You can start to just hone your talent in the server. Fang is the next biggest question mark, just because he is so unproven. Whereas Floppy, Grim, and Junior have at least all had looks or have been forced in that deep end. I want to see Fang stay composed on LAN against international teams. Floppy, Grim, and Junior, massive redemption comeback stories. All three of these players are going to be hungry as anything to prove themselves, to make sure that they prove the last decision the org made about them, the last org they were with made the wrong decision about them, and they can hang. North America can compete. Flop around and find out. So Floppy on C9, a bit of a glue guy, right? He might have to play the roles that not everyone wants to play because he's willing to do it and anchor them and turret them down. Grim, again, great defense. He needs to become unleashed in this roster, though. This Grim has to be the superstar of this lineup, or the team doesn't go anywhere. And then Junior, Opping, I need to see him compete with OC and then look to surpass. Compete with Monacy. I need you to not shy away from those fights you were shying away from on Furia. You said you were shying away from them because everyone was screaming in Portuguese in your ears. I can understand that. But at the end of the day, now you have the team around you, like you did on Triumph, to show how good you can be. Go out there and do it. Go out there and don't be afraid to scrap with these teams. They're going to be underestimating you. Make them respect you. Yeah, this was just really nice to see Complexity reinvest in the North American scene, and that will round out the best of NA. Talk about Brazil now. And finally, let's talk about the Brazilian region. South America, but Brazil and Argentina, mostly, almost all. Brazilian CS has, I might get some flack for saying this, unfortunately been on a bit of a downward trend in the past couple of years. MIBR seemed to try and reinvigorate the scene in Brazil when they brought in Fallen, Fur, Taco, Coldzera, and tried that MIBR roster that was competitive, second in Flashpoint, right, to Mad Lions. Unfortunately, MIBR weren't able to get together. The KNG roster came and went, became No Plano, 00 Nation now. It's been a bit of a mess. I think that MIBR negotiation definitely weren't helped by the Cloud9 public salaries and stuff like that, but there's money in the Brazilian scene. There's fandom in the Brazilian scene. Now we need those things to work together to create really good teams of really good players. Because right now, Brazil only really have one team playing at a tier 1 level. Godsent are pushing that tier 1 level, and then everyone else is in a bit of a gravy train, unfortunately. Contracts, kind of like Cis Region, can be a bit tangly in Brazil. But there was more movement this year, which does give me some promise that things can change and great teams can be assembled. So let's jump into the very best team, the only one really worth talking about from North America, or from Brazil, I mean, South America, is Furia. This team surpassed MIBR, especially after MIBR folded without the KNG roster. This Furia lineup actually looked like they could have competed with the best in the world in Europe at one time. Unfortunately, they ended up going to Europe in 2021 and looking a little outclassed, outgunned, like they hadn't been getting the same level of practice some of these other teams had. And maybe some of their strats weren't as effective as they once were. Art is a player I mentioned when I was talking about Pnder as someone who's very aggressive and willing to break open the game with their unconventional aggression that maybe some players aren't expecting you to do. As that started to become figured out, there's a little bit of roster shakeup with Henny, it's just a bit of a mess. Ultimately, Henny's out, and Safe, pronounced or spelled Safi, but pronounced Safe, is in. Safe is going to hopefully totally unlock Art again. Drops also in for This roster has to go back to what made it successful. They have to find their identity again with their cohesion. This team has insane firepower now. Safe will give them an op that can compete. Art has to find openings into rounds, and the rest of this lineup can definitely clean up. Their 4v5 is really, really good still. Keep an eye out for Furia. They will be able to upset teams in 2022. I hope Safe keeps developing from pain. Let's just talk about the rest of the Brazilian rosters. They're not even getting their own cards because the scene was such a mess. True, as from an outsider's perspective, the scene was an absolute mess, a lot like the North American scene. Everything big in Counter-Strike happened in Europe and the CIS region in 2021. This 00 Nation team, their prospect team is called 00 Prospects. That's hilarious. 00 Nation were the ex-MIBR lineup that basically bought themselves out of the contract to go with a new org that never assembled itself, never materialized. KNG, Coldzera is joining this team, Leo DRK, Malds, and VSM. I feel so apprehensive about Coldzera because I know the history of the player. He's one of the best to ever touch the game. But then I see what he did on Complexity, and I'm just so underwhelmed. He just didn't seem like he was motivated or wanted to be there. And so it's a tale of two identities for Cold. What version of Coldzera do we get on this team? If it's the Coldzera that's amazing, this team could 100% challenge Furia and then other European teams to be the best. If not, I don't know if this team has the same 4v5 potential that Furia does when Art goes out and gets information. That's it. And my BR, there's I don't even think Kagu's still coaching this team, right? That's how out to that's how listless they are. They are a ship without a rudder right now. This is the team that I actually wanted to talk about. Godsend. I'd mentioned this a little bit when I talked about Olofmeister and FaZe clan. Remember Olaf leaving FaZe, and then I talked about Forest, Freiberg leave. Like I want players like Olaf, Forest, Freiberg, maybe even Coldzera to go and start to develop the next talents in their respective scenes. Nitro is a player like that, where when you're no longer performing at a tier 1 level, you are going down a step in competition, still loving the game and believing that you love the competition of it, but you're just bringing up the next talents. You're fostering the talent in the scene, making it better, giving it experience and guidance. A perfect example of this actually happened with Taco. Taco is doing it right now on Godsend. He's redefined his position though. Taco's become a supportive player on MIBR back in the day. He's now an in-game leader, leading these younger talents at Phelps up the rankings with the experience he's gained from tier 1, bringing it to tier 2. And then all of these tier 2 players who are now becoming tier 1ers are having are being given all this information from Taco that they would have to take years and years and years to get themselves. I think when regions don't do that, it does hamper their progress in the long run. So let me give you the example of where it hampers the progress and then where it helps. So it hampers the progress in the Swedish scene right now. I already mentioned them. Forrest, Freiberg, Get Right. These are players camping, exist even, XIZT. These players are camping paychecks from orgs to perform at a tier 1 level or just be a fucking streamer, like Get Right, whatever, instead of honing their craft and using the knowledge they've spent literally decades of their life getting and sharing it with others. It's disappointing because the Swedish scene is suffering as a result without the leadership trickling down. We're seeing it work with Godsend. Godsend are becoming, in my opinion, the second best team in Brazil under Taco's leadership. You look at the CIS region. There are so many ex-Navi, ex-VP, ex-Gambit players even still in the scene. I mentioned one of them maybe even in this long video where I was talking about Katie and losing a 50-50 gunfight on his stream to Bialy in top mid on Mirage. I had to look up Bialy right now. He's not even playing for an org anymore. He's playing for ex-Izako Boars, which is a team that was a tier 2, tier 3 team in Ukraine, Poland, one of those two countries. And he is just in-game leading a team that is developing talents that are now on MOUZ NXT, like Shui and Shane. The in-game leader of MOUZ NXT, the best academy team, was under Bialy at Izako Boars. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think players like Shui and Shane are being given the experience and knowledge and imparted with the pedigree from Bialy and doing nothing with it. I think that's helping them become the best players on the best academy team. And that's really my perspective on cycling talent within your region, right? The veterans have to train the next crop of talent and should become, coaches for those people, in-game leaders for those people. They might not want to sit down and watch VODs all day. They don't have to do that. That's for the stats guys, the strategic coaches. Other teams and notable free agents. Let's see. Let's just talk about free agents first. MSL, Sticko, Sunny, Flusha, JW, Sergey, Golden, Poison, Henny, Farlig, Obo. I think Woxic is still on EF, so there's a lot of talent that is out there in the roster, in the scene. You go step down in talent, you're gonna look at players like Chiquinho, Kyojin, Marky. These are players you're gonna pick up for your like academy teams or something like that. And then the academy teams themselves are stacked to the gills. Mondesi was on Navi, Prospects, Navi Next, whatever their academy team is, who was touted to be the next Simple, who just wasn't able to step up into Simple's shoes because Simple's playing in Simple's shoes. And Torzi get promoted from Mao's NXT. Players like LNZ, ZTR for NIP getting fill-in roles while they were sorting out devices coming in and how that team was going to work and the roles. I already mentioned Mao's NXT. So Exertion's on Mao's now, got the call up. Or did he? No, Torzi did. Sorry. Exertion could be the next call up for this Mao's team if they need it. But then they got Shui and Shui and Shane, um, who are also prospects who can come up. Like I mentioned Shui being under Bialy and Yazako Boris. Shane was on his team as well. Polish team, not Ukrainian if I said Ukrainian. So there's talent in the scene. There's a lot of young, upcoming talent. There's a lot of players who've had names and looks. Fragger might actually have a team. Fragger might actually be on a team. I don't know. But there are teams too that have players, maybe players in contract prison or teams that can raise up the rankings a lot in 2022. Entropic are one of those teams in the CIS region. Elian, the rifler, really, really talented. I was actually quite surprised that he didn't get picked up in this offseason, which kind of tells me that he's probably in contract prison. Fours, K23, Mad Lions picked up Mishu. That's the team with Boro, Sumdai Young, TMB. This team could do something, I think. Mad Lions, Mishu, I do have a bit of faith in. Sinners lost Oscar, so they're probably going to fall off a little bit. Skade got Dreamer. Copenhagen Flames came top 8 at the major. Didn't get an organization. I'm pretty sure that core with Nico Daz and Roy as their stars, Hooksy calling. I'm pretty sure that team is staying in Copenhagen Flames. That team can get picked apart after enough time. They tried to stay together and go to complexity. They asked for too much money. According to rumors, it didn't work out. That team might get picked apart later. Movistar Riders, Spirit, there's Sprout. There's so many teams in this scene right now that are talented orgs with talented players. Really, really, really promising 2022. On more excitement, 2021 got an exciting new tournament organizer. The We Play Academy League has taken the perception of Tier 2 talent, or Tier 2 Counter-Strike, by storm. It's taken it and flipped it on its head, shown that thousands of people can be interested in quote-unquote lower level, or Tier 2 Counter-Strike, if the broadcast is good enough, if the talent is there, if it's good to watch, the graphics are good, interviews are good, talent is there. I've mentioned that before, but the We Play Academy League, I think, are doing great work. We Play in general are putting a lot of money into the scene, and I hope they get rewarded for it by Valve or whoever. A lot of big orgs are investing in young talent, kind of maybe hopefully assisted by We Play showing that talent to everyone. But the investment is really, really important for Counter-Strike's long-term growth. These are the teams that had academy teams, and it's expanded further. Eternal Fire and Spirit, they're not necessarily knock your socks off in terms of prestige when it comes to orgs, but the fact that these teams are the ones investing in academy teams show how scrappy some of these orgs are, how they're trying to get ahead of the curve. Right at the bottom here, I've got Flashpoint. The hope of 2021 is a mess, a complete mess. There's a really small graphic in the bottom right corner. Contact Gaming, Cloud9, Dignitas, Team Envy, Fun Plus Phoenix, Gen G Esports, Mad Lions, MIBR. Those organizations are all founding organizations of the project. Only 3 of them have rosters, and only one of those rosters, being Mad Lions, is one that I would consider even caring about the scene, even pretending to care and improve the scene in any measurable fashion. Contact, no lineup. Cloud9, no lineup. Dignitas, camping a paycheck in Sweden. Team Envy, no lineup, folded this year, along with Cloud9. Fun Plus Phoenix, no lineup, folded last year. Gen G, no lineup, folded. Mad Lions, prospective. Picked up Mishu, I like it. MIBR, camping paychecks and living off former glories in Brazil. Ultimately, the scene is not sorted, the scene is not suited, the scene is not perfect. There's a lot to go through, but there's a lot to look forward to. I think that we can build off of what we learned in 2021 about the online era, land light environments, crowds coming back, and how they're actively influencing the games. Like in Denmark, they did a little bit. We need to take all these things, learn from them, learn from We Play Academy League, learn from these graphics, learn from these interviews, and keep evolving as a scene. Keep challenging ourselves to beat the best and somebody knock off Navi. My name has been P0nder, and this has been my very long breakdown of the January 2022 Counter-Strike roster shuffle. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you made it this far. You absolutely have to. This video is way too long if you made it this far and not liked it or subscribed. Okay, have a great day. Catch you in the next one.